Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel!
In today's video, we're diving into a surprising fact. Even though the US is the world's largest oil producer, it still relies heavily on oil imports, especially from its neighbor, Canada. But why is this the case? Stick around as we explore why Canadian oil is so crucial for the US energy market. The election of Donald Trump as President of the United States introduced significant uncertainty in international trade, particularly with key North American partners. Among President-elect Trump's most controversial promises was a proposal to impose a 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico, including crude oil, two of the largest oil suppliers to the United States. This policy, aimed at protecting domestic industries and addressing trade imbalances, has raised concerns about its potential economic repercussions on both sides of the border. Canada and Mexico together account for more than half of all U.S. crude oil imports, with Canada alone supplying approximately 3.8 million barrels per day, representing over 50% of total imports. Mexico, the second largest supplier, contributes billions of dollars worth of heavy crude oil annually to U.S. refineries, which rely heavily on these imports to meet domestic energy demands. The proposed tariffs threaten to disrupt this critical supply chain, potentially leading to higher energy costs for American consumers and industries, while jeopardizing the economic stability of two key U.S. trading partners. The tariffs could also strain long-standing economic partnerships fostered under the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, and trigger retaliatory measures, with both Canada and Mexico considering counter-strategies to protect their national interests. This brewing trade dispute highlights the complex interdependence of the North American energy market and underscores the broader risks of escalating protectionist policies in a highly integrated global economy. Why the U.S. still needs Canadian oil. While the United States is the world's largest oil producer, with an impressive daily output of approximately 21 million barrels of petroleum as of 2023, it continues to rely on imported oil, particularly from its northern neighbor Canada. This may seem counterintuitive at first, considering the U.S.'s abundant domestic oil resources, but the reason lies in the specific types of oil produced and consumed. Despite the U.S.'s position as a global oil powerhouse, the country faces challenges in meeting all of its refining needs with domestically sourced crude oil. The primary factor is the differing grades and characteristics of the oil produced within the U.S. versus Canada. Most of the oil produced in the United States is light sweet crude, a type of oil that is relatively low in sulfur and has a lower density, making it easier and more cost-effective to refine. This type of crude is highly valuable for producing gasoline and other refined products. However, many of the largest and most important refineries in the U.S. are specifically designed and optimized to process heavier grades of crude oil. This is where Canadian oil, particularly oil sands crude, plays a vital role. The oil sands deposits in Canada, primarily located in Alberta, produce a much heavier, tar-like crude known as bitumen, which is rich in carbon but less valuable in its raw state. To extract maximum value, it must be refined in refineries built to handle such heavy crude. U.S. refineries, especially those along the Gulf Coast, are well equipped to process these heavier grades of oil. This makes Canadian crude particularly important, as it fits the refining capabilities of these facilities. Despite advancements in domestic drilling techniques, such as hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling, which have boosted the U.S.'s ability to produce large amounts of oil, the country still needs to import heavy crude to maintain the efficient operation of these specialized refineries. Additionally, Canadian oil offers the U.S. a reliable and geographically convenient source of crude. Given the close proximity between the two countries and the well-established pipeline infrastructure, including the Trans Mountain and Keystone pipelines, transporting oil from Canada to the U.S. is both cost-effective and logistically simple. This steady supply of Canadian oil contributes to U.S. energy security by reducing dependence on more distant and politically unstable regions of the world. Furthermore, Canadian oil is seen as a more secure and stable supply, particularly when compared to oil from regions in the Middle East or Venezuela, which can be subject to geopolitical instability and supply disruptions. Environmental considerations also come into play when discussing Canadian oil. While Canadian oil sands have faced criticism for their environmental impact due to high carbon emissions associated with extraction and processing, Canadian oil is still viewed by many as a more environmentally responsible option compared to oil from regions with less stringent regulations. Additionally, the U.S. is able to implement more stringent environmental protections in refineries, reducing the overall environmental footprint of the oil. Economic factors further highlight the mutual benefits of this trade relationship. The U.S. is a key market for Canadian oil exports, while Canadian oil serves as a crucial component of U.S. energy production. This interdependency fosters a strong economic partnership between the two countries, creating jobs, driving investment in infrastructure, and contributing to the stability of both nations' energy markets. In conclusion, despite the U.S.'s status as a top oil producer, Canadian oil remains an indispensable part of the U.S. energy mix. The unique qualities of Canadian heavy crude are essential to the operation of U.S. refineries, and the proximity of the two countries ensures that the relationship remains mutually beneficial. As both nations continue to work toward energy security and environmental sustainability, Canadian oil will likely remain an important factor in the U.S. energy landscape for the foreseeable future. Canada's role in U.S. energy supply. Canada's role as an energy supplier to the United States is pivotal. As of 2023, Canada accounted for approximately 62% of all U.S. crude oil imports, exporting about 3.8 million barrels of crude oil daily. This represents more than half of Canada's total crude oil production. Beyond crude oil, Canadian natural gas accounts for roughly 25% of U.S. imports, primarily used for heating and powering industries in northern states. Canadian provinces like Quebec, Manitoba, and Ontario also export hydroelectric power to U.S. states such as Michigan, New York, and Vermont, highlighting the depth of energy trade between the two nations. Economically, energy exports to the U.S. contribute over $100 billion annually to Canada's GDP, supporting hundreds of thousands of jobs. Alberta, the heart of Canada's oil production, produces around 80% of the crude oil exported to the U.S., with its oil sands representing one of the largest reserves of crude oil globally. The potential imposition of tariffs has led Canadian officials to consider a range of countermeasures, including reducing or halting oil exports to the U.S., which could have far-reaching consequences. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has advocated for using energy as leverage, suggesting halting electricity exports to the U.S., a move that could affect approximately 1.5 million American consumers, particularly in states like Michigan and Wisconsin. Meanwhile, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has opposed cutting oil exports, warning of significant economic harm to Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has taken a measured approach, exploring alternative retaliatory measures such as targeted tariffs on U.S. goods like steel, aluminum, and orange juice. Economic implications of tariffs. Reducing or halting oil exports to the U.S. would have profound economic and political consequences for both countries. For the U.S., such a move would disrupt energy supply chains and increase costs for consumers. States like Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, heavily reliant on Canadian crude oil and electricity, would face shortages and higher energy prices. These disruptions could ripple through the U.S. economy, particularly in industries dependent on affordable energy. For Canada, the economic implications would be equally severe. Crude oil exports are a major source of revenue, and any significant reduction could slow GDP growth, increase unemployment in the energy sector, and strain provincial budgets. Alberta, in particular, would bear the brunt of these effects, potentially exacerbating tensions between the province and the federal government. The economic fallout could also lead to a surge in inflation, complicating Canada's domestic economic landscape. Politically, cutting oil exports would likely strain U.S.-Canada relations, undermining the cooperative framework of the USMCA, and potentially triggering retaliatory actions from the U.S. Such measures could escalate the trade dispute, reducing prospects for a negotiated resolution. Alternatives to cutting oil exports. Given the risks associated with cutting oil exports, Canada has been exploring alternative measures. One prominent option is imposing retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods critical to specific states. This mirrors Canada's response to U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum in 2018, where equivalent duties were applied to American goods like bourbon, orange juice, and steel products. Another strategy involves diversifying energy markets. Canada has invested in infrastructure projects like the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion to increase access to global markets, particularly in Asia. This would reduce Canada's reliance on the U.S. as its primary energy customer, providing more flexibility in future trade negotiations. Strengthening domestic energy security by investing in renewable energy and enhancing energy efficiency is also a priority. These measures would mitigate the impact of trade disputes and align with Canada's long-term environmental goals. This mismatch creates a need to import heavier crude from Canada, ensuring that refineries can operate efficiently. Additionally, the geographical proximity and stable trade relations between the U.S. and Canada make Canadian oil a reliable and cost-effective source. Importing Canadian oil also helps maintain low prices and meet the high energy demands of American industries and consumers. Another critical factor is the strategic nature of the U.S.'s domestic oil reserves. Despite being a top producer, the U.S. has a relatively smaller reserve base compared to countries like Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and Canada. By relying on imports for certain types of oil, the U.S. preserves its reserves for future needs, ensuring long-term energy security. The historical context further underscores the reliance on Canadian oil. During the 1970s oil crisis, the U.S. faced vulnerabilities due to its reliance on foreign imports, prompting a shift towards strengthening domestic production and diversifying sources. However, the complexities of refining capabilities and market demands mean that Canada remains an indispensable partner. Moreover, the U.S. exports a significant portion of its light sweet crude due to its unsuitability for domestic refineries, further emphasizing the need for Canadian heavy crude imports. The U.S.'s refining industry also plays a pivotal role in shaping its oil import strategy. Many refineries, particularly along the Gulf Coast, are designed to process heavy sour crude. Retrofitting these facilities to handle light sweet crude would require substantial investments, making Canadian imports an economically viable solution. Additionally, the integrated nature of the North American energy market ensures mutual benefits, with Canadian oil supporting U.S. energy security and economic stability. Mexico's plan of retaliation. In response to Trump's proposed tariffs, Mexico has also considered several countermeasures. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has indicated the possibility of reciprocal tariffs on U.S. goods, warning of a potential tit-for-tat escalation that could harm businesses operating across both countries. Mexico is proactively strengthening its economic position by reducing its trade deficit with countries like China and attracting foreign investment. Initiatives to substitute imports with domestic production and develop key sectors such as automotive and aerospace aim to bolster Mexico's economic resilience. Broader implications of protectionism. The interconnected nature of global trade magnifies the effects of protectionist policies, leading to retaliatory measures and cascading disruptions. As the U.S. contemplates tariffs on imports from key partners, the potential economic fallout underscores the risks of undermining integrated supply chains and long-standing trade relationships. The economic landscape of 2025 and beyond will likely be shaped by the outcomes of these escalating trade tensions, emphasizing the need for measured and cooperative approaches to resolving disputes in a highly interdependent global economy.